Hello and welcome to the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast, helping everyday runners fuel better, run smarter, and recover faster so you can reach your full performance potential. I'm your host, Stephanie Natchek, dietitian, fitness coach, and a fellow runner too. As the owner of Stephanie Natchek Performance Nutrition, I've spent the last 10 years helping runners learn to fuel their bodies, level up their running performance, and establish healthier relationships with food and exercise. If you're ready to reconnect with your love of running, then let's get started on today's episode. All right. Hello and welcome everyone to this week's episode of the Fuel, Run, Recover podcast, where I am so excited to bring you something a little bit different this week. I am joined today by Jessica Beale, who is a clinical sport pharmacist. And I'm so excited for the conversation you're going to hear today. We are getting into all kinds of things to do with supplements and medications and just you name it when it comes to, sport products and stuff like that. Jessica is going to share all of her wonderful expertise. So, Jessica, thank you so much for joining me today and welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I am so excited about this conversation, something near and dear to my heart. And I hope the listeners enjoy it as much as I'm sure our conversation will be.
Wonderful, wonderful. So let's start with learning a little bit more about you. I want to hear all about your background, your education, what led you to become a clinical sport pharmacist, which is obviously a really kind of interesting niche area to work in.
Yeah. So it's actually kind of a new area. So the fact, if you've never heard of it, don't be shocked. It's relatively probably in the last 3 to 4 years in the US starting to grow and blossom. So it's relatively a new area within pharmacy. So hopefully shed a little light on that. But I am a pharmacist. I've been a pharmacist for the last 15 years. I played volleyball, soccer, and softball in high school, Division I volleyball. So definitely been an athlete my entire life. After and during pharmacy school, started doing CrossFit, and everybody started asking me like, hey, what about the supplement? How do I recover better? How do I sleep better? My muscles ache, because I was in pharmacy school, and I also had a background in like supplements and nutrition beforehand. So everyone was just like gravitated to ask me those questions, and I kind of geeked out on it. I started also at that point competing in international and Olympic weightlifting, which is the snatch and clean and jerk, and found out I was actually decent at it. So I competed nationally and internationally in that. And it's a drug tested sport. So to kind of like further hone my merging of pharmacy and sport, I started asking questions about supplements. Can I take this? Is it banned? Is it not banned? I'm drug tested. And so I started just a consulting business of my own about 5 years ago called the Athletes Pharmacist, where I work with athletes, organizations, and teams to consult on recommendations from anything from supplements to medication choices, and doing a ton of education on everything in between.
Absolutely. That's so fascinating. And like honestly, I mean, I think pharmacists are a hugely underutilized tool. Like I mean, not just for athletes, but just sort of in our communities as a whole. I, as a dietitian, get tons and tons of like medication supplement types of questions like that. And I'm always like, you know who that's a great question for? Your pharmacist. Because like
Yeah, I feel like so many people think the word pharmacist and they either think they count by fives in the pharmacy and they give me my pills,
yeah.
or like pharmacy school is just like memorizing drugs, when in reality pharmacy school's like learning all about the mechanisms in the body and the reactions and the enzymes and all of the intricate details, so when you're told about a drug you can understand how it will work, but also help predict some of the side effects, because it would be impossible to remember all the drugs and their side effects otherwise.
Well, absolutely. Yeah. I think what people really don't understand is like the amount of knowledge that pharmacists have in regard to like all of these different, not just like medications, like prescription medications, but like, yeah, the supplement world and herbal products and all kinds of things. So, I mean, I have mad respect because I can't even pronounce half of the things that people are taking. And, continually have to Google, wait a minute, what is that one for again? So I'm glad that you are here, and I'm glad that you're out there, as a resource for myself and also, my clients too.
We appreciate that you support pharmacists. I think many people overlook the fact that they're so easy to get to, and people forget that, you can, a lot of pharmacists enjoy these questions and enjoy the interaction with other healthcare providers or the patients just to answer these questions that they're like, I get to use my clinical knowledge. So it's super
Yes.
fun. I love it.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I wanted to start our conversation today, and one of the main reasons that I wanted to like have you on the show was to just talk sort of broadly, because I mean, like, there's just so many things out there to get too specific in
Yeah.
any one category, but to talk about like supplements. Why are there so many different products out there? Like, why are there 10 bazillion supplements on the shelves? And what are some of like the major challenges that you see athletes facing when it comes to like sort of selecting what supplement plan is for them? Like looking past the marketing, looking past what other people are taking, what makes it so difficult to figure out like what do I need for supplements?
Those are great, great questions
Mhm.
to start off a supplement talk with. I mean, if you even just like start to look at the numbers, and I think it's the numbers of sales. So, I mean, I think the last number I saw was like over the counter sales of supplements is like $40 billion industry, and it's not
Yeah.
getting any smaller. So you have that this is a large demand in the market, but you also have the ease of entry into the market. So we'll kind of discuss that a little bit later about like manufacturing and what it means to actually get a supplement on the market is way easier than putting a pharmaceutical on the market. So I think between the demand and the ease of entry, there's so many easy ways to get your supplement out there, plus social media and all the marketing, as you just kind of alluded to. But on top of that, you have a consumers who are really growing and like wanting to invest in their health and wellness in more of a preventative way. And often it's not covered under a pharmaceutical, or it's not, they don't need a pharmaceutical. So they're looking at over the counters to help improve performance, sleep, mental acuity, overall well-being, everything like that. I think I see it in my like aging population. They want to have better health. Um, Research is always uncovering new products out there that are promising. So sometimes you'll see those as supplements. Stuff is moving from prescription to over the counter. There's nutrient gaps. Obviously, as a nutritionist, the quality of food has decreased, and there's more people taking medications that decrease absorption of nutrients. So you can use supplements to fill a nutrient gap. And then obviously, like you're talking to a lot of your listeners wanting to improve performance. So I think that's some of the main reasons for like why there's so many supplements out there. People are looking for a lot of different things, and it's pretty easy to get into for this market. Why is it so challenging? That is, I think, what we've talked, like, kind of started to talk about. Of we're gonna have to talk general on the podcast because there's so many individual factors. Like, what is your training? What's your age? What's your gender? Your overall health? Your goals? So many nuances. Um, and then as a consumer, also the challenges facing supplement safety. Are you getting a quality product? Are you getting something that's not banned by your governing body? Is it effective? Is there evidence that supports it? Um, Cost, interactions, there's so much out there. I can see why any consumer is overwhelmed with like choosing a supplement.
Yeah, for sure. And I find that like, people are either taking sort of nothing or like, maybe just vitamin D and that's it, or they're coming in for an assessment and they've got 20 different things that they're on.
I actually feel you on that. It's either one or two, and like you said, very like in that respect, very safe supplements, a
Yep.
multivitamin, a vitamin B, a vitamin D. And
Yep.
then you have these other people that have like everything from like nootropics to pre-workouts to sleep meds to thyroid support and you're like,
Yep.
how do you afford all of it?
That
How do
too.
we know
That
it's
too.
not interacting?
Yeah, where do you even start? Oh my goodness. So that actually is a super great segue into my next question, which is what is the pharmacist's role in helping people kind of understand and choose supplements?
Yeah, I think, I mean, for me, I feel a big point is education. Kind of like we're doing here, educating to the community. I enjoy doing it on social media also to try and provide a neutral slash scientifically backed education so that they know what they're choosing is maybe something that would benefit them if they meet X, Y, and Z. And it can't be very specific, again, as individual needs. So educating about, intended uses, benefits, possible side effects, things like that. I think having a pharmacist also help you pick out a safe supplement. And that could be making sure that it's like third party tested, that there's no contraindications based on your overall health and situation. As we talked about, people coming in with so many products, making sure you don't duplicate ingredients so that suddenly you are now taking like 10 or 20,000, say I use a vitamin D because it's in 5 supplements that you take.
Yeah.
Um, and that is, I think, one of the big things is making sure you're not duplicating. And then again, pharmacists can really help with individualizing recommendations based on medications you take, nutrient depletions, even looking at lab work and helping you understand maybe you need to supplement this, or training goals and different things like that.
Okay, yeah. So there obviously a ton of education and advice
Yeah.
and just kind of understanding things. And I love that you mentioned about, what I usually refer to as the double dipping of, if you've got I see it a lot, vitamin D certainly, but also magnesium, B vitamins, things like that, where it's like, you don't even realize you're taking this like energy booster, and then you've got your multivitamin, and then maybe you had a vitamin B12 deficiency at some point. So now you're on a B12 on top of it. It's like, holy moly, like you got enough B12 to last the rest of your life on board right now.
I was gonna say, I see it with like you said, some of the vitamins like that. I see it with caffeine a lot.
Oh yeah.
They're they're not thinking of their coffee, and then they take like a pre-workout, and then they maybe take like like an energy booster or something that has like green tea and some other caffeine stimulants in it. And by the
Yeah.
end of the day, you're at like 600 or 700, even more milligrams of
Yeah.
caffeine, and they're like, I can't sleep. I don't know why I can't sleep. I can't
Yeah. I'm
sleep.
tired all the time. I'm exhausted.
So yeah, I think duplicate ingredients, and there's little ones in there that like people don't think about that add up. One for me I think about a lot is like zinc. It's in a lot of immune
Yes.
support,
Yep.
and high levels of zinc can actually cause a whole host of problems themselves. And all of a sudden, 5 milligrams here, 10 milligrams here add up to way more than you're supposed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. Not to
Yeah,
mention what you're also getting from your diet, right? And if we're talking about
true, very
athletes,
much so.
well, yeah, and this is the other thing that people tend to forget is that like we don't only get nutrients from our supplements, we get it from our food, and especially for like athletes and high volume athletes who are doing a lot of training that need a lot of fuel, like you're eating a substantial amount of calories, so you're hitting 99% of your nutrient requirements just from the fact that you're needing to consume such a high calorie amount, as opposed to somebody who's maybe needing a lot less in terms of
Yeah.
their fueling. So
Yes, you're
yeah.
just eating more, so you're getting more nutrients in that
Exactly.
increased volume of food. So yeah,
Yep.
you may not need as much in a supplement versus somebody who's at a lower training volume and
Yep.
eating less.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So there's also like, from, and this is my, non-pharmacy perspective, my dietitian perspective, I feel like there's a lot of different sort of categories, or what I would consider sort of categories of supplements, right? There's like your vitamins and minerals, right? Like your vitamin D, your vitamin B12, those types of things. Then you've got like your sport foods, which would be your gels, your chews, your, kind of products for
Energy
intra
bars.
run,
Yeah.
and yeah, protein powders and that kind of thing. Your caffeinated products, those come in all shapes and sizes these days. Your herbal products, your over the counter kind of, like you said, sleep aids or energy boosters, or things like that. So within sort of all of those different types of supplements, are there differences in like regulations and testing and that kind of thing? Or is it more so that like if it's considered a supplement, it's probably under the same type of yeah, guidelines or regulations and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I think for the most of what you mentioned in that group, the majority of it falls under dietary supplements
Okay.
and the Dietary Supplement Education Act. And basically, as that is basically under the FDA, and you don't have to really test it or report it. You can just kind of go to market, and they only come if there's reported problems. So that's kind of the scary part of the supplement industry, is there's not really regulations with entry into the supplement. You could technically put olive oil in a capsule and put a label on it and market it and sell it. As long as it doesn't cause harm, nothing's going to happen. There is a little nuance, I think, in the in the category that you mentioned of like sport and energy drinks, they're technically the same. They could be marketed as food or supplements, but from my understanding, it comes down to the company's decision on how to market it. And that would mean they would have to fall under a food or a supplement regulation. And I don't know how they determine that, but that is up to them. So for the most part, all the stuff that you mentioned is going to fall under the supplement kind of
Okay.
less oversight
Yeah.
rules. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I'm located in Canada. And so what we have in Canada is something called an NPN number, a natural product number.
Okay.
And
Interesting.
my understanding, again, as a non-expert in this particular area, but I always tell my clients, like, if a product doesn't have an NPN number, just don't, like, that would be sort of the bare minimum that I would want on a product in order to ensure that the labeling is accurate for what you're going to find inside that capsule, for
Yeah.
example. And so what you're saying is that, like, you unfortunately don't have something similar in the
We
United
don't.
States. Okay.
No, we don't. We do not have like an NPN number. The only thing that we would have is like a certificate or seal on the bottle that's like NSF, informed choice. I believe you guys use informed choice.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like USP is in the US. I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that are out there, but there's a seal that basically says that this product has been tested by a third party, meaning that somebody outside of the organization received the product, they ran it through a testing process to determine that what is on the label is all that's in the bottle and nothing else, and also what's on the label is at the level that's in the label. So I think there was in during COVID they had come out with this study showing melatonin. They had tested 300 or 400 different products and found that basically 80% of them, the product in the bottle was different than what was on the label. Some were at like 10% of the labeled number and some were at 300%. And I mean, at this point during COVID, they were recommending taking melatonin as a supplement possibly to help. And so like you're getting these bottles that you think have 1 milligram and all of a sudden it's like 30. And so sadly, ours, unless it has a seal on it, there's no way to determine if that is accurate, what's in the bottle.
Yeah. Yeah. And what I always say to my clients too is, like, that doesn't necessarily mean that a product works or is effective or is safe for you.
Correct.
All we're saying is that what's on the label is what's in the
Is
bottle.
yes,
Bare
yeah,
minimum what you want to look for.
for sure. And I mean, I'm sure you may have some athletes that listen that are even drug tested. And so I don't does your code mean that it doesn't contain a banned substance or
I
no?
don't know about that. Yeah,
Okay.
I'm not sure about that. All I
No, I
know
was
is
just
that, like,
curious.
if it says it's got 1,000 IUs of vitamin D, it's
Okay,
got 1,000 IUs of vitamin D.
perfect. I do a lot of work with like drug tested athletes. So we always talk about making sure we have one that has like a third party endorsement. So it
Yep.
doesn't have a banned substance, because sometimes they were finding out of like the Mayo Clinic, they did a study on some products, and they found that like about 25% of them were adulterated, meaning that they contained something they weren't supposed to.
Wow.
Now that was more common in the like muscle building and the weight loss category and the like
Yep.
energy boosting category. So those three categories had like a larger number than like vitamin B or vitamin D. But
Yeah.
I still found like 25%. I was like, oh wow, that's a lot.
That's a huge, far
Yeah.
too high. Far
Far too
too
high.
high.
Far too
Yeah.
high.
So, we always want to talk about, like, the foundations of just good nutrition, good training, getting enough sleep. Like, we know that supplements are not a replacement for those basic
Yes.
practices. But let's say that someone is, like, training properly, they're fueling well, they're getting in enough sleep, they're taking their rest days. Are there any supplements that you feel have potential? And of course, we're not saying everybody should run out and buy these things, or that even they're going to be effective or work for you. But just what are some of the things that, like, you feel like the research is pretty solid for, and you're like, you know what? If somebody came to me and they were already ticking off all those other boxes, then maybe the next step is to add in something just to put that cherry on top.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. Is supplements are literally there to supplement a strong foundation of sleep, recovery, solid training program, and nutrition. So obviously, if an athlete has optimized those, Then looking at a supplement, some of them that I see kind of like generalized across the board that a lot of my athletes take. Magnesium is probably one of the top ones. Athletes need such a high amount of magnesium compared to the general population because magnesium is involved in so many aspects of muscle contraction, reactions in the body for energy, that most athletes are depleted in magnesium. There's also a lot saying that the food supply doesn't have as much magnesium in it. So I find a lot of athletes benefit from magnesium. I like magnesium glycinate or bisglycinate because it does cross the blood-brain barrier, and just like it's calming and kind of helps relax, especially if you take it at night before bed. A lot of my athletes also, we do some creatine, even if it's super small doses to help with like muscle recovery and sleep. If you're optimized, caffeine can do wonders for performance as long as you kind of know what its impacts are and you're not taking it too late. Vitamin D, because you guys are in Canada. um, I'm in Florida and I
Okay.
still need vitamin D even in the winter because I work and then my sport is actually inside, so Olympic weightlifting. So I'm only out really in the mornings and the late evenings to walk the dog. So I still need vitamin D. So as you go further north, vitamin D, and there's so much research backing showing the benefits of vitamin D for athletes and keeping them at an optimal level. But I usually recommend getting tested a couple times a year just to make sure you're supplementing appropriately. Endurance athletes, especially like electrolytes, kind of playing with electrolytes to help as we get to summer and more risk of dehydration as the temperatures come up and probably longer runs since it's not freezing up there.
Mhm.
So those are probably like the big ones. The other one that I would say that I do a lot of is for just kind of aches and pains. I'm not a big NSAID person, so like a turmeric, boswellia, ginger kind of mix for aches and pains to kind of help with like joint pains, and then iron in my female athletes, especially female endurance athletes.
Yeah, yeah. And again, I mean, it all comes down to that personalization. Like,
Very.
where do you live? What's your diet like? What's your blood work telling us? What do you need? And I think this is where people can go a little bit off the rails with ending up on so many different products
Yeah.
is they're taking everything that all their friends are taking, everything that their coaches told them to take, everything that they saw marketed on their social media, and it starts to build up and add up like crazy.
It does. And I think everyone's like, well, it worked for that person. It's going to work for me. And everybody's different, genetics, goals, how you respond to stuff. So that is not always true. And I think it's really hard for people to like have a filter. And I usually try and tell my clients, like, make sure you have some questions and like some things that are red flags. Like if somebody's selling this online and you know they're getting payment for the ad, is that really going to be beneficial to you? Are they making these claims that are just outrageous? Like, it's going to give you 50 hours of energy and you're going to be
Mhm.
able to go further, kind of have some filters there, and, have a little bit of like curiosity as to why would this benefit for me? And I always go back to like asking them, why am I taking this? Like, what is the reason that I need to take this? Is it because somebody told me it's going to give me more energy? Am I actually having a problem with energy? And if I am, is my nutrition and sleep and everything optimized? Then maybe it might be something I can consider. So there needs to be a lot of questions asked of yourself before you consider adding a supplement in.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point, and just yeah, having that checklist, right, of
Yeah.
things to go through. But yeah, so in terms of quality, so we kind of talked already about just those basics of looking at having the seals of the third party
Mhm.
testing, or if you're in Canada, at the very least, you want to have an NPN number on your products and that sort of thing. Is there anything else in terms of supplement quality that you think is important? Like, is there anything else that you would want someone to look for?
There is, and I feel like as a consumer, it might be difficult. And this is when I would recommend reaching out to nutritionists. Um, a lot of like PTs have a good background, pharmacist, some physicians. In is it at an effective dose? So a
Mm.
lot of this you may not know. I often use like examine.com as a good research source, but it's often overwhelming for the general consumer to kind of figure out what is the dosing that I need to take. It on the bottle, it may say 1 capsule, but is that an effective dose for me and for my goals? And also, like, is it do I know when to take it? Should I take it in the morning? Should I take it in the evening? One of the biggest examples I see, and probably one of the most common ones, would be like the use of magnesium. As you know, there's so many magnesium products on the market.
Yes.
There's like,
Yes.
what is the difference between magnesium glycinate, bisglycinate, malate, citrate, magnesium oxide? And so a lot of people will come in, they're like, yeah, I'm taking magnesium. Somebody told me to take magnesium. So I took magnesium oxide, and I'm like, ooh, that one doesn't absorb as well. So you're really not getting all the benefits. And somebody else is like, I'm taking magnesium glycinate, but I stopped taking it because it affects my GI tract. And so sometimes the actual salt form of the product may not be the best choice for you. So I think these nuances are something that working with a professional that understands this is going to be super helpful, so that you get your money's worth out of the product, both in the dose and making sure you have the effective product.
Yeah, that's so important. And like, it can be overwhelming. And we keep kind of using this like easy example of vitamin D because
Yeah.
and I think actually, and B12 is another one that comes to mind.
Yeah.
Someone gets told by their doctor perhaps that, oh, your blood work came back, your vitamin B12 is low, go get a vitamin B12 supplement. And I can imagine that person going to the vitamin aisle at their drugstore and they
Mhm.
look at the 17 different options within the same brand, right? The
Yep.
same
Yep.
brand has 17
Mhm.
options. Your dosing ranges from, your 1000 micrograms per day up to like, 10,000 micrograms a day. And it's like, well, which
Which
one
do I
do I
choose?
need?
Yeah. And like more isn't always like vitamin D. You're talking about vitamin B as in boy. Vitamin D as in girl is not one that you want to take too much of. Vitamin B, your body's going to excrete, but vitamin D will start to build up. So, I mean, sometimes too much of something over the counter is also not good.
Yes. And what I see, and you had mentioned COVID, and what I have seen a lot lately, even now, like sort of years out from that, is people coming in on with their supplement list and they're still taking very high doses of zinc. Like we've got, I find a lot of people are like 50 milligrams of zinc per day, these like really high doses. And that's not even taking into account what they're getting from their diet. And it's like, oh yeah, I started that because I heard it was good for immune support. And, 4 years later, they're still taking it. And it's like, whoa, 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 let's
Let's
give
back
yourself a
down a little
rest.
bit.
Yeah, give it a rest. Give it a
Yeah.
rest.
Yeah. I agree with that. I have seen that also with the zinc. People are like, more's better for longer. And I'm like, no, there's some side effects to that one.
Yeah, yeah. And vitamin C, and
Yeah.
just all the things, right? We
All
we
of it.
sort of
Yeah.
think about it as like more is better, but that is definitely not the case. And if your supplement list is getting long and getting expensive, then definitely go talk to Jessica about what she can do about it. So when we were talking back and forth about what we want to talk about today, there was a couple of scenarios that you had mentioned that you wanted to share a little bit more info on, just some common things that you see. So what are some of the sort of major issues or sort of mistakes or things that you wanted to point out to the listeners that kind of are more specific to the running community?
Yeah. I would say the first thing is anemia. I feel like that's a big topic, especially for female runners. Endurance athletes in general have a higher risk. Females have a higher risk. So, female endurance, you see it a lot. And I see a lot of people who will be like, oh, I'm fatigued. I must need to take iron. So, iron is not always the cause of the anemia. It could be like low vitamin B, but making sure you get lab work and assess that, and then making sure you work with someone to find the proper iron and the proper amount, because obviously everybody knows if you don't have enough oxygen you feel awful and your training impacts. So I think for my runners, or for my endurance athletes, especially females, looking at getting lab work and assessing red blood cells and anemia risk is definitely impactful. And we do this a couple times during the year. Sometimes during the off season, they may be fine. And then come mid, like intensive training season, their levels start to drop. So we may only be supplementing half of the year, depending on kind of training schedule and goals. I would say the other thing with endurance athletes is obviously recovery. And the big thing, one of the things I've seen, and it's been pretty impactful, is my athletes when they get injured or immobilized due to like surgery or injury or something like that, making sure that we usually add like a creatine and a collagen to kind of help with the healing process and maintaining some of that muscle mass, because we do know how important it is to maintain muscle mass, and you worked really hard for it, so you don't want to lose it.
Absolutely, absolutely. And collagen is so interesting because collagen is one of those ones that a few years ago I was kind of like, meh, collagen, like meh. But it's so funny how, like, a little bit of new research comes out, and now it's like, oh yeah, okay, we're actually starting to see that there's some benefit. But in certain populations and certain scenarios that we can see some improvements with collagen. But going back to, kind of the comment that you had made before, the dosing is so important, and you see so much variation across different products. And yes, people want the convenience of, say, like having just a gummy or a capsule, but unfortunately with something like collagen, you need larger amounts, that like you'd have to take that whole bottle of gummies in order to get the amount that we're looking for.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Is some people are like, "Oh, it's called I'm taking it," and then you look at it and you're like, "That's like a tenth of the dose." Like, I feel like collagen's one, creatine's one, because it's a larger amount, and people are like, "I take one," and I'm like, "No, you need that whole bottle." Like you said, you're going to
Yes.
eat a whole bottle of gummies, which is a whole nother conversation. But
Yeah.
I felt like I felt the same about collagen a while ago, and then I was like, I started taking it, and I was like, "Oh, it's either I'm getting older and I need it,
Yeah.
or it actually works."
Yes. Yes. Love it. Well,
So
I'm not like a big like I'm not a big protein powder person, but I have recently started like adding protein powder in, just to make sure that I'm like at least hitting my targets. I had two babies. I had twins 6 months ago, and well, yeah, but you know how your nutrition when you've got little kids, it just like it gets so much harder. So I'm like coming around to adding some things where I was normally like, oh yeah, I can get everything I need from food, but
yeah, and I mean, people always assume, I think pharmacists are the first to like pass off medications or supplements, and most of us really want, to choose that food first approach. And sometimes, I mean, I'll tell people, and I'm guilty of it too. I'm like, I keep like a protein bar or a protein drink in my bag because sometimes I know that it's a better choice than some of my other options, and I try and keep it as convenience. I would much rather have it as a food choice, like making sure I get all my macros through food. But every once in a while, like life gets busy and you're like,
yes.
well, I got a protein drink here. I can add some water to it, and I know I will feel much better than if I
Yep.
choose like a quick bag of M&Ms.
Yes, exactly. If I'm grabbing a cookie out of the cupboard as I'm, running to my next meeting instead of, yeah. It's always that balance of like, okay, what's ideal, but we also live in the real world. And I think that that's where there is such a role that can be played for supplements, as long as, of course, we're just making the right choices for us, and not letting that list get too long or too expensive.
Yeah, for sure. I usually tell people, if you're questioning your like supplement purchase, like the amount you spend monthly, we need to talk.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So something else that you had mentioned in kind of our like, conversation leading up to actually sitting down today was about certain medications that can impact nutrients in the body, and actually cause, contribute or cause issues, deficiencies. So I think that's such an interesting topic, and something that, I'd love to hear more about if you've got just a couple of examples you want
Yeah.
to share, especially really common medications that people can be sort of on the lookout for, or of course ask their pharmacist about.
Yeah. I think many people overlook the fact that medications can impact the gut, can impact nutrient absorption. Probably two of the most common that I see is going to be proton pump inhibitors. So anything for acid reflux, one of the top prescribed medications across the world. And because of the way it works, so it lowers the level of acid in your stomach so that you don't get reflux. Well, that level in your stomach is supposed to be a certain amount so that your body can absorb certain nutrients. So with proton pump inhibitors, we often see people have decreased calcium levels. So there is actually a warning on proton pump inhibitors about increased risk of bone fractures due to the decreased absorption of calcium. So as a runner, this is something, or endurance athlete, anybody, this is super important to make sure you're either supplementing with calcium or making sure you get enough in your diet. It impairs the absorption of like iron, magnesium, so many vitamins that you're like, wow, like I had most people don't realize the impacts that a simple little acid reflux medicine, which is also over the counter, can actually have on your nutrient levels. The other one that I see a lot is going to be birth control pills. They can affect the gut microbiome. They can affect, especially vitamin B and magnesium, because they believe that your body processing the birth control pills requires more energy. Therefore, you need those multivitamins to help process those pills. And the changes in the microbiome may affect the absorption. So, between the two, you definitely see a lot of vitamin and nutrient depletion. And basically, the easiest way to describe it is birth control pills tend to deplete all the vitamins and minerals that you need for a healthy pregnancy. So if you're on birth control pills, it's often helpful to take a prenatal because those are usually the same ones that are depleted.
Fair enough, fair enough. Yeah,
So,
and that's so interesting, like, you know, people don't really rarely, I think, would kind of the average person be thinking about interactions between medications and nutrients in the body. Us as, like for us, food and medication interactions is, a big thing that we learn about in school. And of course, for you, that's like your entire life is interactions between different things. But something that probably not a lot of people have really thought about is like, how can maybe taking this pill alter the pathway of like other things. And same with interactions between taking too much of one nutrient that impacts the metabolism of another, and just everything needing to be in balance. Another one that we see a lot of, that to our, with our athlete population wouldn't be as common, but it can be, would be metformin.
yes,
And yeah, so
that was my third one. If
oh,
you
that's
wanted,
number 3. Okay.
that would be number three. Would definitely be metformin.
Yeah.
I see it. I see it in, like, you have your diabetics. You also have a lot of like your PCOS athletes, females
Okay.
that
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
metformin. Um, and I usually try and make sure, if it's a young female, to talk to them about the nutrient depletions in metformin. I talk it with all my patients, but really, like, I feel like a lot of my younger athletes that are PCOS often forget about this and don't know it, and they're the ones that need a lot of support too. But metformin is notorious for its also lack of absorbing, especially B vitamins, magnesium. I feel like it's the same thing across the board.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, if you're an athlete, you're a runner taking really any prescription medications, it's
Yes.
always a good idea again to connect with your pharmacist and just find out if there's anything that you might need to be more aware of in your diet, either increasing your food consumption of those things or maybe going a supplement route if that's necessary.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, there's little ones that, the other one that I see a lot would be like thyroid. There's certain
Mm-hmm.
thyroid, it doesn't so per se affect the absorption, but you just have to space it. So there's little nuances in most of your medications that I would specifically ask when you're picking up like, they always ask, do you have any questions? And most of us would be grateful if you did ask a question like,
Yeah.
hey, does this interact with anything? How would this affect my performance? Like, are there any side effects I need to worry about? I participate in this. This is what's going on in my life. That is, we all enjoy it. And
Yeah.
so I hope that you kind of take that chance when we ask if there's a question, to ask some of those questions that you may not think about.
Love that. I love that. So we talked about this a little bit already, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity if there was any other examples that kind of came to mind. Where are there some kind of specific scenarios where you feel like supplements can really make the difference for a runner, can really sort of be the most impactful? So obviously, if somebody is deficient in a nutrient, then we want to correct the deficiency and
Correct. Yes.
figure out how we can get them up to the levels that they need to be. But are there any other scenarios where you do think there's like an opportunity for supplements to play a role and to really help people level up their performance?
Yeah. I think it's a great question. So I think, again, it goes back, a couple answers. One, it goes back to the goals of the athlete. You may need to supplement for just a period while you're working. Say you're trying to increase muscle strength so that you can do a triathlon. And so you may need to add a specific supplement at that point to help with building muscle or just increase training volume. Another area I see it often is athletes having trouble sleeping. Sometimes that has to do with travel. Um, maybe jet lag, crazy life, early morning training sessions, or late night training sessions.
Yeah.
I'm a late night trainer, and I know when I train in evenings, it's hard for me to get my body to wind down. So some
Mhm,
nights,
mhm.
if I train late, I do need some additional supplements, but I only take them on those training nights, not every single night. So I think sometimes for sleep and recovery is where I see adding supplements can make an impact on an athlete.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. That's so fascinating. So, as we kind of wrap up our conversation here, is there anything else that you wanted to share with the audience? Any other kind of final advice or tips or things that we didn't quite get to cover in our episode so far?
I think we covered most of it. I wholeheartedly agree that sleep, nutrition, a solid training program, and definitely recovery. I feel like something that's a lot of people in today's society overlook is the importance of rest and recovery, both mentally, physically, and so many different ways. And working on your mindset is going to be the foundation. And then the supplements and are just like icing on the cake to use to help get that little extra so that you can perform a little bit better or reach a goal maybe a little bit quicker. But without that foundation, supplements are just kind of a waste of money. And also, I think that making friends with your pharmacist, nutritionist is very important to
Yes.
ask these questions. Is this supplement right for me? Is this the right dose? When should I take it? Is it going to interact with anything? Is really important. If you're just kind of winging it and going off like social media or what somebody else recommended, you're probably going to miss the mark in one way or another.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I love that. That's such great advice. So you mentioned that you own your own consulting
Yeah.
practice. And where are you able to work with people? Like, is there specific, like, in terms of licensing or regulation or anything, like, can you work with people from all over the place or just kind of in your state?
So it depends on how you want to define, depends on what I'm doing for work. So
Okay.
if we're kind of like health coaching and reviewing stuff, I can do that all over. If
Yeah,
we're
virtually.
looking, yeah, virtually. If
Yep.
we're trying to do like specific testing, so say we're looking at like hormone testing or labs or nutrigenomics or pharmacogenomic testing, and we're trying to get into some more nuances, I'm only licensed to do that in the state of Florida.
Okay.
So it
Okay.
depends on kind of what we're looking at. Can I
Yep.
educate all over? So it depends
Fantastic.
on what you're looking at.
Okay, I love that. Well, that's great. At least, you can be a resource for people who are listening to this podcast from all over the globe. I always love to bring on guests who, people can connect with you and they can reach out and, book a consultation for a supplement review and just get a little bit of your advice and feedback. So, that being said, where can people find you and connect with you?
So I am on LinkedIn at Jessica Beale-Stahl, PharmD, and I'm also on Instagram at JESSB as in boy, RX. And I have my own website, which is the athletes with an S pharmacist.com.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much again for all of your enthusiasm and your expertise and, sharing all of this great information with me and with the whole audience. I learned just as much as they did today. So I really, really appreciate you taking the time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me, and good luck to all of you training. And thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I really, really hope that you enjoyed today's episode, obviously, as much as we enjoyed recording it for you. And I'm sure that we'll have Jessica back one day to give us more of her wisdom here. And yeah, I just want to thank you one more time for listening, and we will see you in next week's episode. Bye for now. The information on this podcast is for educational purposes only and is not to be used or relied upon for the diagnosis or treatment of any health condition. This information does not create a client-practitioner relationship and should not be used as a substitute for professional medical advice.